welcome to today's webinar about artificial intelligence and the future of X-ray. My name is Gökhan Güneş, Marketing Director for X-ray AI and Analytics at GE Healthcare, and I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers. Dr. John Mongan, Associate Chair for Translational Informatics and Associate Professor of Clinical Radiology at University of California, San Francisco. Dr. Kimberly Kallianos, Assistant Professor of Clinical Radiology at UC San Francisco. And Alec Baden, Senior Product Manager, X-ray AI and Analytics at GE Healthcare. In today's session, we will talk about our collaboration in developing new AI solutions for X-ray and take a look at how we go from a concept and an AI model to a clinically viable product with some real-world examples. You can send in your questions through the chat window at all times. We'll do our best to answer them at the end, and we'll also follow up with answers after the session. Let's start with the promise of AI. Would like to hear your personal perspectives on AI in radiology and why it matters. Alec, let's start with you. What is the vision of GE Healthcare as it relates to AI in X-ray?
Absolutely. Our vision was developed primarily through direct observation of the radiography workflow and customer feedback from experts like Dr. Mongan and Dr. Kallianos on the call today. This helped us appreciate that many personas are involved in that workflow that can benefit from artificial intelligence. Personas like the X-ray technologist, the bedside care team, the radiologist, and everyone else involved. So this theme led us to the three key pillars of development shown here: quality, efficiency, and clinical decision support. And the other theme that we keep at the center of our development efforts is this concept of embedded AI and seamless integration onto our X-ray systems. So if we first consider the X-ray technologist, we've sought to embed AI on the X-ray system to provide quality checks and notify the tech of potential errors before an image is sent to PACS. Additionally, we want to embed AI that removes or automates mundane, repetitive, or error-prone tasks from the technologist workflow in the spirit of efficiency. And last, but obviously not least, is the need for clinical decision support algorithms to the bedside care team and to the radiologist. So basically, how can we embed AI on the device and transmit key diagnostic information to PACS to potentially increase diagnostic accuracy, diagnostic confidence, or provide more effective triage of critical situations? So collectively, these key ideas have formed our initial vision and development practices for AI at GE X-ray.
Thank you, Alec. That's a comprehensive look. Dr. Mongan, with your background in informatics and early involvement in co-developing solutions with GE, what are your goals in developing AI for radiology?
So I first became involved in working with the deep learning branch of artificial intelligence about 5 or 6 years ago. And from the first project that I worked on, it was really clear to me that this wasn't just a stepwise incremental improvement over where we'd been with computer vision, but this was really something that was revolutionary. At the same time, there were a lot of people, particularly people outside of radiology, who I think got a little bit carried away with the advances that we were seeing, and were making proclamations about how this would be the end of radiologists as we knew it, and a sweeping change in radiology. And I think it's become clear to all of us working in this field that we're really decades at least away from having a digital radiologist, something that replaces radiologists or replaces radiology technicians. And so really my goals for artificial intelligence radiology is harnessing what I see as the newest modality in radiology, something of equal importance to the development of CT, to the development of MR, this incredibly powerful tool that can enable us to do radiology more efficiently, more effectively, have richer diagnoses, and really be the next most powerful tool for radiology.
That's very interesting and very powerful indeed. Dr. Kallianos, as a radiologist, tell us how you've become involved in AI and what potential you see for AI in radiology.
I don't have a background in programming, but rather I'm a clinical radiologist and have seen the increasing interest at that front in terms of in clinical radiology and how we can incorporate these new AI tools into our workflow. And that's been discussed at scientific meetings and in department meetings, and of the increasing interest in our field is something that piqued my interest as well. And I'm most excited about actually applying these tools in our clinical practice and allaying fears about, as John mentioned, will this replace a radiologist, and really explore how this can increase our efficiency and accuracy and really help optimize operations of radiology. And that's what I'm most excited about as my career goes forward and as these tools become more integrated into our workflow.
Thank you. There is a big potential indeed, and also a tremendous amount of hype around AI. But how do we realize the potential, and how do we make it real and usable? Um, if we look at our most recent AI collaboration specifically, Alec, can you tell us more about how these solutions come to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just kind of a story on how it all began. We can get into that, but I'd like to start with what we've actually developed so far, and then we'll talk about really how we got there. So as you can see on the screen, starting from the right, our first release, which was commercially launched in early 2020, provided 4 embedded AI algorithms. And like we were talking about before, these 3 of these algorithms are targeted at the X-ray technologist and improving their quality and efficiency, doing things like helping them automatically rotate a chest X-ray, confirm appropriate protocol selection, and anatomical positioning. And the 4th embedded AI model delivered triage and notification for suspicious findings of pneumothorax. Building on this success, we've recently launched another embedded AI solution to Critical Care Suite for endotracheal tube positioning, which actually detects and overlays the ET tube within the image, identifies the tube tip in the carina, and then automatically outputs that tip to carina distance. And this product was rapidly brought to life under the April 2020 COVID-19 medical imaging guidance from the FDA that enabled specific COVID-related medical technologies to again quickly be brought to market. So that's just a snapshot of really how we've taken it from hype and actually brought it into a product that's being used clinically today by many people. But really how it all began, Critical Care Suite was spawned through a multi-year collaboration with UCSF and other clinical partners, spanning the entire development process from concept and development through validation. And as I mentioned, now evaluation, as both of our experts on the call today are currently beta testing that latest version of AI technology and Critical Care Suite that I just explained. So just kind of doing a retrospective on this, and I think it was fun going back through this and really understanding how far that we've come. But it all began through conversations between GE X-ray AI leadership and UCSF in mid-2016. And these early conversations really focused on the what and the how. So what clinical problem are we trying to solve? What does the output need to be? What performance do we need to achieve? How do we actually make this clinically useful? So then through 2017 and 2018, as you can see, we began that development process, data collection, image annotation, prototype development, and redevelopment. And eventually that brought us to the time where we had a very good model, a very highly performing model, and we had to begin that arduous process of clinical research and the regulatory submission cycle. And ultimately, this culminated in our first FDA clearance that we received in August of 2019, almost 3 years to the date from when we began these initial conversations on how are we actually going to bring an AI solution to market and bring it into the radiography workflow. And then shortly after, in November and December of 2019, we actually had our first clinical installs and started getting our first clinical feedback on how this was actually making a difference in moments that matter in critical situations in patients that are being seen every day around the world. So I think through it all, the key theme that stood out to me and stood out to us at GE is that close collaboration with clinical partners who help you clearly define the problem statement at the beginning that you're trying to solve, and maintaining that close collaboration throughout the development cycle so you can quickly understand some of the pitfalls, make improvements, and really be connected during that development cycle is absolutely critical to make meaningful AI solutions.
Thank you, Alec. Clearly, this requires a close collaboration and rigorous steps to turn the idea into a clinically useful solution. What about the required performance of such algorithms? Dr. Mongan, what are some of your criteria for acceptable performance in terms of sensitivity, specificity, to add value and provide diagnostic support?
So that's an interesting question. I think it really goes back to what Alec was saying about the importance of knowing what the problem is that you're solving, and not just the area of medicine that you're working in or the area of radiology that you're working in, not just what disease you're working with, but specifically the clinical problem that you're solving. And I see this oftentimes as a problem in research that's done, and particularly academic research, where people start with a data set and then decide what they can do with the data set and build an algorithm. And it's only after they've completed constructing their algorithm that they give any thought to how that's actually going to fit into the clinical workflow. And that's a real problem, because getting to your question about what's the necessary performance, the answer is it varies, and it can vary quite widely. There may be some workflows where the existing state of the art is poor, or where really what you're just trying to do is screen or prioritize, where relatively low sensitivities or specificities in the low, in the low 90s, for instance, might still have clinical utility. There are other workflows, things people have talked about, things like, you have a PET CT with several thousand images, and let's identify just the few images that have the relevant findings on them so that we can accelerate the work of radiologists. For something like that, your per image sensitivity and specificity has to be probably 99.999%, because no radiologist is going to want to read a study where they're worried that there are some images that have important findings on them that they're not being shown. So really the key is understanding specifically the clinical problem that you're solving, how your algorithm is going to fit into the clinical workflow, and from that, everything else flows in terms of defining what the minimum threshold of acceptable performance is, and then how the algorithm has to be constructed to meet that and provide the correct outputs, and what data set you're going to need to be able to train an algorithm that can do that.
Dr. Kallianos, what are the must-haves for you to be able to integrate AI into your daily clinical practice?
I would echo what Dr. Mongan said in terms of the big question for me is thinking about what type of practice AI is being incorporated into. Is this a resource-poor setting where there isn't access to skilled practitioners to interpret images, versus is this a hospital system that has strong radiology support and rather needs help with increased efficiency and image prioritization and work list prioritization. And so in the particular setting where I practice, I'm most interested in trying to see how we can improve the efficiency of our workflow to make sure that we get our increase our turnaround time, or really highlight, as Dr. Mongan mentioned, the most abnormal images, or bring those to radiologist attention more quickly. And that's something that I think in our particular setting would be a great application of artificial intelligence.
Thank you. Now that we've discussed how we move from an initial concept to a final product and what makes a product clinically useful, next I'd like to get some feedback from UCSF's evaluation and clinical use of the AI app. Dr. Kallianos, can you tell us about your experience with these AI algorithms and walk us through a few examples?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We have a few cases that we have collected illustrating the findings during our evaluation, and I can just show those now to demonstrate how the features appear to us. So in this first case, we have a patient with ARDS who had a newly developed left-sided pneumothorax on a routine morning chest radiograph. And you can see on this slide the critical care suite output here, showing that there is a suspicious finding for pneumothorax, and that's at the top of the screen. And then on the second overlay, you can also see that endotracheal tube localization tool, highlighting the endotracheal tube and providing a distance from the carina. And so that's how the secondary captures appear to us in this particular case, highlighting, as I said, the pneumothorax and localizing the endotracheal tube. I think we'll take a look at another case. So this is a case of a patient who recently underwent lung transplantation. I was reviewing this case with a trainee who did not detect an abnormality, but we can see that there is in fact a trace right pneumothorax, and that was indicated as a suspicious finding by this artificial intelligence algorithm, showing a potential application there in support of education. And then you can also see the overlay for the endotracheal tube placement in this patient as well, and the distance from the carina annotated. So we have the original image and then our two secondary captures as they appear to us in PACS. And again, a good teaching case for the trainee with whom I was reviewing this study. And then finally, a set of x-rays on a patient with heart failure who was intubated in our ICU. This first study, there is no pneumothorax, and we can see that the endotracheal tube measurement is provided 2 centimeters above the carina. And if we advance to the next slide, we can see a subsequent radiograph performed for this patient 2 days later. Now you can see that the endotracheal tube has been advanced very near the carina, and on that secondary capture image indicating the distance is less than 1 centimeter from the carina. And this is a case where repositioning of the endotracheal tube would be recommended, and we needed to make a phone call to inform them of that. And you can see that overlay indicating graphically the finding as well. So 3 cases really showing actual clinical cases where the AI algorithm was used in our institution, and the output and how it was, how it was available to assist us.
Okay, thank you for these great examples, Dr. Cagliaro. We're almost at the end of our session here. To conclude, I'd like to take a question from the audience. This question here is actually a great one to recap our discussion. And the question is about what's next for AI and what problem should the industry tackle going forward. And maybe we can start with you, Dr. Cagliaro. Where would you like the industry to focus next when it comes to AI in radiology?
It's a huge question, and I think my answer is influenced by my practice setting. So I'm most excited about AI applications that can help support us as radiologists in terms of increasing the efficiency of our workflow and helping us provide better care. They're increasing pressures in terms of volume, sick patients, thousands of images. So I'm most excited about AI support tools that help us move efficiently through cases and identify those cases that are high acuity and that need our attention more rapidly. So really workflow support, I think, is where I'm most excited in my personal practice.
Thank you. Key areas indeed. And Dr. Morgan, what do you see on the horizon for AI?
So I completely agree with Dr. Caglianos, and I think that the key for artificial intelligence in the next few years is getting it into the reading room, into the scanners, into the clinical workflow. I think we've seen over the past several years all kinds of amazing things in computer labs, in product demos, in research papers, all kinds of potential for what we can achieve with artificial intelligence. And the next major challenge is the translational step, bringing this stuff actually to the patient, to the clinician, to the radiologist, into the reading room, onto the scanners, into the clinical workflow, so that we can actually bring this to bear where it's having effect on patients. And I think that the challenges there include integrating artificial intelligence so that it's a seamless part of the digital environment that physicians work in. So that's the electronic medical record for many physicians, that's the PACS systems for radiologists. And additionally, bringing those artificial intelligence algorithms into the information environment of the clinical workflow so that they have access to and awareness of the comprehensive information about the patient and are able to act on that context, so that we start to know, for instance, not just that there's a pneumothorax, but whether or not it's a new pneumothorax, which is of even greater clinical importance to radiologists. And so I think that's really where we're going, is bringing these things into the clinical environment where they can actually now have effect on patients.
Thank you. That's very promising. Alec, where is GE X-ray heading with AI? What's next?
So as I think about the future of AI development in GE X-ray, I'd be remiss if I didn't go back and highlight exactly what Dr. Caglianos was displaying with the 3-patient case review that she had shared. 3 to 4 years ago, if you'd asked me the same question, my response would have been that I want to see the technology that we're developing in the hands of clinicians and physicians who are going to make a meaningful impact in patients' lives, and seeing our technology add value to the workflow, add value in diagnostics, add value in triage. And I think we're hearing some of that now from folks like Dr. Caglianos, who again are using this technology clinically. And if I think about where we want to go in the future, Dr. Mangan hit on a couple very key things that we want to integrate into our solutions as well, especially when we think about how are we going to communicate these AI results, right? So how are we going to make sure that the information, the high-performing, high-quality output from these AI models is going to be translated into, again, meaningful outcomes that get into the hands of the folks who need it. So whether that's the X-ray technologist and augmenting their ability to take high quality images or be more efficient with the way they get through their exams, or if it's a bedside clinician and giving them real-time access to critical clinical information, or the radiologist, as you saw, giving them additional information in packs that helps augment them, of course, not replace them, but adds clinical value and diagnostic confidence to the decisions that they have to make every day. And I loved what Dr. Mongan said as well, and it's something that we've definitely started talking about internally at GE Healthcare. How can we take AI technology from just a snapshot in time and actually apply it longitudinally? You know, the perfect example that he shared with pneumothorax. How do we give the information to the radiologist to help them understand if that's a new pneumothorax or if that pneumothorax is progressing, resolving after treatment, different things like that. So again, looking at things over time and giving you a much broader look at a patient's particular story, and somewhat thinking of it like, you know, your blood analysis that you get from, you know, your typical checkup with your primary care physician. They take blood, they analyze it, they give you a report out on, you know, where you are in terms of the various ranges of different pathologies you may be developing and what your physiology shows. Why can't we do the same thing with AI? And if you just take chest x-ray, for example, there is so much diagnostic information in that image. If you can give some sort of automated report that helps you identify all of the potential findings within that image and gives you almost that automated blood report from an AI perspective, but as it relates to radiology, I think there's a lot of power in that. And again, I think we're going to continue to stay true to the 3 development pillars that we identified before. It's quality, efficiency, and clinical decision support. But again, looking at the gaps within that radiography workflow and bringing some of this technology that we've just discussed from kind of an after the fact, post-imaging, post-processing AI algorithms to kind of pre-acquisition. So how can we identify potential quality errors by the technologist before the X-ray is taken, different things like that. So I'm really excited to be a part of the development team and excited to see what we can develop in the future. So stay tuned to see what we have in store. Thank you very much.
Okay, this concludes our webinar. Thank you all for joining us, and special thanks to our speakers for their insights and our ongoing collaboration. Our webinar series will continue with more sessions in January and February, so watch this space. You can book live demos of GE's AI solutions on our virtual booth right on this portal. And if you want to challenge our algorithms and test drive the Critical Care Suite AI app, we have a website ready for you at gexray.ai where you can upload your anonymized images and run the algorithms. That's gexray.ai. Thank you.